right? If you see me, you're gonna hear the words everyday lives. And often people say, where are we going, or what's it gonna look like in the future? Where is the system going? And it's always the same place. It's always people having a life like everybody else has. And that is universal truth. I used to work for a guy who would say, when people said, can people live in the community, or should people live in the community, he would say, people are born in the community. People are born into families. They grow up in families. What's the question? Why are we still talking about whether, or should we, or who? That's where most everybody lives. In fact, in Pennsylvania, at this point, we're serving about 53,000 people. Today, the census in our state institutions is 870 and dropping. We announced the closure of Hamburg Center, so that's another 80 people leaving. The average length of stay is 45 years. The average age is 65. So you see where this is going. We have yet in the state a handful of private institutions, generally funded through the same funding stream. But by and large, almost everybody is in the community, and most of them are with their families. So Shelley Reynolds, you're going to hear her later, she's has this way of talking about it. In Pennsylvania, we have probably 190,000 people that are diagnosed with a disability. It's a little squishy these days because as the definition of disability and autism spectrum changes, we're not quite sure who to count in the CDC 1.5 anymore, but let's say about 200,000 people. We're serving 50,000. Where is the other 150,000? They're in the community. They're home with their families. 50 managed to make it in the door. Not all of them need services, of course, but we know some of them they're on the waiting list. And so many of them are living an everyday life. Their families are trying to make it happen. Their families need support to make that happen. But there's always this question about, is it everybody? Like, what about people with really significant disabilities, et cetera? You know, I've been meeting, one of the things that's changed since the last time I was here is there are a lot more people living in the community with their families on trachs and vents. There are some very medically involved people sustained at home by their family members because the Medicaid program through EPSDT provides services to them all through childhood. And so we meet them at the age of 21 when they age out of EPSDT. So what's the question? They're there already. They're living there already. And I think that the challenge in our job is what it's always been. Those of us that can see the humanity, the beauty in every person when you look into their eyes, and you know, no matter what's being said or not said, or no matter how much movement there is or isn't, you know they're there. And you know that all the feelings of love and the desires for attention and connection and belonging and being important and making a difference and wanting to have fun and feel love, it's all the same for every single person. And for us, the challenge is how to make sure every single person gets that, gets what they need, what we all need, and that we don't marginalize anybody because of the significance of their disability. And that line of significance keeps moving. I mean, I've been in the field for 46 years. And I remember when I thought people with medical needs couldn't live in the community. I remember when I thought people couldn't work. And I've been proven wrong and proven wrong and proven wrong, and I think I'm getting the message now. Assume everything, expect miracles, imagine the impossible. Anything's possible. It's a matter of making it true. And so the destination's the same. Every single person having a rich everyday life with first relationships and meaning and a sense of belonging, and secondly, opportunities to do things, to be somebody, to accomplish something. That's the destination. Some things around that change. Certainly, we see many more people with more significant disabilities surviving childhood and living into old age and with their families at home. So, for instance, we've discovered families can't get respite care if they've got someone who's got medical complications. And in fact, this year we ended up doing respite care for a family at Hamburg Center. because there was no community home to do that. And so as we modify our Medicaid waiver, we're changing respite. We're changing what we pay for respite. We're changing where you can do respite. So these families can get reliable, predictable respite in a place that they know all the time. The other thing that's changing is exploding rapidly is our knowledge about the brain and neuroplasticity. And as we have come to are learning that the brain is always changing, that parts of the brain are always taking over for other parts of the brain, that if you don't use it, you lose it, that the phrase they use for the development of neuropathways in the brain, that the more, what the other expression is, wires that fire together, or nerves that wire together fire together, so that the more stimulation and the more activity there is in our lives, the more brain matter we build, and the more we are capable, all the way to death. So understanding that has ramifications for those of us that are aging, right? You know, it changes what we think about aging, and it also changes what we think about disability. And so advances in neurobiology, understanding about diversity, I think folks on the spectrum are changing the world. We've gone from the 1990s having very little understanding of what autism is to now seeing it as neurodiversity, and that many people have autistic characteristics, may have the diagnosis or may not. It is a differentness, and it's a differentness that through their eyes we can see everybody's differentness. So the change in how we view disability and what we understand about the brain and neurodiversity is going to change how we conceptualize our system. So as an example, as we go forward in our 2 new waivers, we are making folks on the spectrum eligible for all services just as people with ID are. And the reason we're doing that is because we've been noticing that there are people on the spectrum diagnosed in public school who used to not be on the spectrum, who 10 years ago would have graduated with diagnoses of ID, not autism. So that the percentages in the school system are changing. And so we're revamping our system so that we're ready to embrace all those folks who need services. And the other thing that I think that is changing around us as we're leading toward the same destination is technology, and technology in lots of different dimensions. Certainly everybody thinks about first of all, assistive technology for being able to control your own house and control your own environment and communication, but also people think about the monitoring technology, which allows people to be a lot more independent because of the ability to monitor with sensors or video cams. But I also think the other technology is the technology that's linked to neurodiversity or neurobiology. And so we're seeing real advances in things like neurobiofeedback now with folks on the spectrum who have post-traumatic disorder, because the engagement through the technology actually helps people change their brain patterns. And so those are all pretty exciting innovations sort of outside and around us that we, in the spirit of innovation, can embrace and incorporate and use them as strategies to get people that everyday life. Our system in Pennsylvania, which serves about 53,000 people, will next year be $4 billion. That's a big piece of change. It's one of the biggest systems in the country, probably just behind California and New York. And 50% of it is federal money. And so people ask me, what will block grants do? What will CAPS do? The question is, what will it mean to lose an entitlement? So be clear, all the strategies you hear, no matter what they're called, the real strategy is to remove an entitlement from the American environment. And once we lose the entitlement, we will never get it back. We will never get it back. And the nature of the entitlement, if you don't understand it, is, and the bottom line is, every state dollar a state is willing to pick up, the feds have to match. So when we have recessions and the welfare rolls go up and people don't have a job and more people need Medicaid, they get Medicaid. If we were to have an epidemic, if Zika were to hit this country, God forbid, and we were to have a ton of children, right, with microcephaly, they would all get services. But in all those other mechanisms people talk about, capitation systems or block grants or any terms that are used, it's all about getting less, and it won't grow no matter how big the need grows. And that's bad when you're already running an entitlement. So all of our Medicaid program and behavioral health system is already entitlement. So if they were to get capped, or we were to get capped where we are, which is not the plan, they'd have to figure out what to do about growth in the beginning, what we're going forward. We have waiting lists. We don't even have everybody in yet. So if the program's capped, it is a true tragedy for us. So this discussion in Washington is not idle talk. The vote tonight is not an idle vote. Our governor has been absolutely in the forefront of communicating and making sure every single elected official in Pennsylvania knows exactly what the consequences are. If you don't know, the Affordable Care Act added 1.2 million people. It's about 1 in 4 in Pennsylvania now. 700 people were added to the Medicaid rolls, and 500 people got insurance through the exchange. You're not hearing about hospitals folding, you're not hearing about hospitals and having uncompensated care. People are getting into the doctors, so it is a really profound impact. And while I think people can have an everyday life, don't always need money to do it, many, many, many people really need public funding to get an everyday life.